before we do get started, I will remind you all that we are being filmed and we will be on the council's website, so if you've got a problem with that, then please leave now. We'll get into the agenda, and the first item is apologies for absence. I've not received any, and I can see that we're all here, so I'll quickly go through and if we've had any officer apologies.
No apologies, no.
Okay, so the next item is the minutes. We've got a couple of sets of minutes to approve tonight, and I did have quickly a comment on the minutes from the 6th of December meeting. On page 12, it states that consultation was sought by members with regard to the proposed parking permit fee. This was something that at the time was raised by Councillor Head, and he was more looking for residents to be consulted. The minutes mentions that we're looking for ward members to be consulted, which we do, but his point was more for residents. So if that can be changed, that'd be great. Before I move on, have we got any other comments on any of the minutes? No? Okay, are we happy to approve both sets?
I can only approve the one I was at, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, item 3 is items of urgent business. I've not agreed to any items of urgent business, so we'll move to declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declaration of interest?
Chair.
Councillor Gladhill.
Thank you, Chair. It's more of a point of note. As we were discussing potential charge for parking permits, I do live within one of the parking permit zones, and whilst I don't drive, therefore it doesn't directly affect me, I thought it would be right to mention in case challenged at a later point.
Thank you, Councillor Gladhill. So the first report of the night can be found on page 17, and it's the portfolio holders' annual report. I shall pass over to Councillor Maney.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for having me this evening. The first thing I just want to point out before we start, you've probably noticed already, having read the paper, but the report encompasses the entirety of my portfolio, which is highways, transport and community safety. The bits of the report which are relevant for your committee is as far as page 29, I think, and then it moves on, obviously, to community safety, which is for CGS. So I'm happy to take any questions if you specifically have got on that element of the report, but it is up to page 29 that is the relevant part for this committee. I'll try and move through the report quite quickly, because obviously I want members to be able to ask questions and refer to the bits of the report they want to talk about rather than the bits that I want to talk about, but I'll pick out the bits that I think are the most salient points. I tend, when I'm giving a report to full council now here, I always try to focus on those areas which throughout the year I get the most member inquiries from or resident inquiries from, so I'm going to stick to them. But if there are, again, any bits you want to refer to, then happy to take them. I would start by drawing your attention to paragraph 2 or part 2 of the report. I think that always sets the scene. We have an extensive network, road network. We have a lot of highways assets that require a year-round maintenance exercise, and I think just those figures in that passage highlight that. We've got 545 kilometres of carriageway, 700 kilometres of footway or cycleway, 17,000 street lights, and as I say, all of that is a rigorous year-round maintenance exercise, which I think we do pretty well. Another point I think is really worth highlighting, it's in page 3, paragraph 3 of the report, I think, is that 5,087 inspections are carried out in the last financial year as a direct result from people reporting stuff on the council's website, on the Highways Report It website, which has resulted in 3,600 pothole repairs. I know as a council we're moving to reporting more stuff online, and I think members, I speak as an ordinary member rather than a portfolio holder here, I think there's mixed results in how effective that is, but I think that really sums up for me just how effective I think it is. As a service, we've been able to respond to that many inquiries and carry out that many inspections, and that has resulted in that many repairs. So I think that's something that I hope other areas of the council will look at and see how we've done that, because I think that's a figure that shows how well we as a service are able to communicate and interlink with residents and allow them to report back concerns in their area. Moving on to part 4 of the report, that details the work that the transport services have done over the last year. Their primary role, of course, is to administer the integrated transport block. Last year's allocation was £979,000, and the main areas of focus under that have been safer routes to school, area intervention programme, electric vehicle charging, and to a lesser degree there'll be the areas of focus next year. And I know you'll be looking at the ITB later in this committee. You've written to me privately and said you'd like to review that next year. You review the policies and the criteria that underpin that, which I welcome. I think the ITB is something that I think a lot of members gloss over each year. They think it's a formality and perhaps don't pay a lot of attention to it. But the requests that we put in as ward members throughout the year for works in our ward, it's largely via the ITB allocation that these works are delivered. And it's within our gift to look at the rules, look at the criteria, the policy under that, which dictates what is a priority and what isn't. So I welcome your invitation to review the ITB. It is a really important exercise, and I know you're going to say something about that later on, but thank you for agreeing to look at that. Aside from the ITB, transport services have also been successful this year in administering some outside funding. Road safety on the A126, and we've delivered 4 new curbit schemes in Aveley, Ockenden, Channel St Mary and Stamford-le-Hope, which are obviously very popular with members and the public alike. I don't know, the financial situation in the council is what it is. I don't know whether we're going to get future allocations, but obviously I would always hope that we can get some more money, because there's never enough money for curbit schemes, and it is a successful programme. Draw your attention to part 5 of the report. That details the fantastic work that's done by the road safety team. Again, I won't go through all the things they've done, but I'd particularly like to highlight the fact that every school in Thurrock has been offered some form of road safety training for their pupils this year. I think that's a really worthy piece of work that I think is worth highlighting. Safety of children is paramount to us. It's a priority. And, we've got a lot of schools in Thurrock, and the fact that we've been able to offer them all some form of road safety training, I think, is to be welcomed. Just wanted to say something about the passenger transport team. Obviously, the council doesn't provide public transport, but we do work closely with our bus operators to ensure there's the best possible service for our residents. We're still rolling out the bus shelter replacement programme, which has seen 71 shelters will be replaced by the time the programme comes to the end. And in addition to that, we've got real-time information screens at key locations to make travelling for the travelling public that bit more comfortable. I say something about car cruisers because I know that's been in focus lately. It's an ongoing problem around Lakeside, and I know it's a particular of interest to Councillor Watson, who's highlighted it at full council. As I say, it has been a problem for a lot of years. There's a different dimension to that now because it is a residential area. It's not just a retail area. We are working closely with the police on that. We've just set up a task force. Perhaps that's not the right word, but for want of a better word, a task force to see how we can tackle that. I'm confident that in next year's ITB there'll be some resource for that, so that we can look at getting in a scheme that solves that, or potentially solves that. But it does also need to be stressed that it would represent a departure from policy if we agree to put a scheme down there. It's not something we can repeat every time the problem moves somewhere else. I'm quite sure it would move to another part of the network, because that seems to have been the trend in the past where we have tried to do things. But I do accept that there is a problem along West Thurrock Way now because of the residential properties there, and I'm hopeful that we can look at a solution at some time in the future. The last part I suppose I'd like to talk about is parking enforcement. As ever, we've got a small but growing team of enforcement officers, and I think they do a fantastic job. They're a uniform presence in the community. They offer reassurance as well as, enforce against parking infringements. We're close to doubling the size of the team, and that's enables us to carry out a lot more enforcement operations, and we're working towards a 24/7 operation, which I think for a borough of our size will be a real achievement. HGV enforcement is something I'm very passionate about, and I know that the former leader was something he was very interested in, and he spearheaded a lot of the operations that are still ongoing now. And from April to now, we've managed to issue 6,434 PCNs for HGV parking infringements, which I think again is something that is to be celebrated. I mean, whenever I speak about HGV enforcement, it's always followed by people, HGV drivers or people hauliers contacting me to give an alternative opinion. And I've never said this before, but I would put it on record now. As much as I think our team do a great success in enforcing against HGV infringements, and I know for the residents who live in the streets where it takes place, it offers them some relief. I don't want anyone to think that the council is anti-HGV. We're not. They are the lifeblood of many of the businesses that operate in Thurrock. But at the same time, when they do park in an antisocial manner, or they do park in contravention of restrictions that we've put there for very good reason, we will enforce. I said that was the last item, but sorry, I just wanted to parking services. I think, if we look at the surplus income generated this year is £241,000. Again, that's not through taxing motorists, that is through a range of income streams that we then invest directly back into the service. So I think, overall it's been a busy year for us. There's lots more to do. You're going to be looking at the ITB for the next financial year, which will set out our transport priorities. But for now, I'm happy to take any questions or refer to any parts of the report that you particularly want to talk about.
Thank you very much for the report, Councillor Manion, for attending this evening. It is very much appreciated, and there's a lot of positive stuff in your report. I particularly appreciate your fervency in tackling HGV nuisance, given we have an issue down the Manor and have done for quite a while in Stanford-le-Hope. Just a quick question to kick off from me, and it's about the free port. It's something I'm quite interested in. I think it's one of the great sort of exciting opportunities we've got going forward in the borough. The report on page 24, it has a couple of sentences on free port opportunities, but it's a bit sparse. It says the team are exploring opportunities to support the free port and provision of initial funding to support active travel and sustainable travel opportunities. I was just wondering if you could put any more sort of meat on the bone on that, if there was anything further you could speak on.
I don't think it's too early, I think, to come up with tangible examples. I think it's really, we know what the free port, if it comes to pass, it's going to be, it has to come to pass. It's going to be a major transformation to Thurrock, but it's going to have an impact on the road network. There's no question of that. And I think what that's really saying is, as the free port is rolled out, we have to get the modes of travel right, the road capacity has to be right. What we don't want to do is end up in a situation, and I think this is a problem across the whole of Thurrock, where we've got heavy industry, to be honest. The industry has gone in first, and then we're worried afterwards about how people get there, what the impact is on residential roads and other roads. I think this is really about saying we need to get that right first and make sure that travel to and from is sustainable.
Thank you for that. I'm going to open to committee now and see if we've got any. Councillor Kelly.
Okay. Thank you, Ben. I'm not sure if this is one for yourself or Mark, actually, under Regeneration, or maybe the Highways guys want to come in, but picking up on the free port opportunities, obviously the Byport's Well, Tilbury Docks, they're obviously going to increase the amount of freight trains that they have going into their establishments, and already we've seen a lot of pressure in East Tilbury, Grays crossing. I know we've obviously got an underpass on the way. Are we sort of aware of this increase in freight traffic? And ultimately, I think there is going to need to be something in place for East Tilbury, for other areas as well, such as Purfleet, to try and address that additional freight. Obviously, it's fantastic because we can get containers moved in and around the country, more sort of carbon neutral, less HGVs on the road. But it is going to be extra pressure on that network, and we are going to need to, I think, good infrastructure in place to make sure, certainly for East Tilbury's example, that they're not trapped behind that crossing. Thank you.
Councillor Maney, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, all I can do is agree. I mean, some of these crossings are at capacity now, and it's not just the extra movements that are going to be created by the free port. We're planning to build 30,000 homes here. There's going to be they need to get a lot of those people into London. So investment in the rail infrastructure is essential. You could argue, as I say, it's a capacity now. What is it going to be like when we have new homes? What is it going to be like when the Freeport is here? I don't know whether, as you say, one of the transport chaps can say a bit more about that, but I can only agree with you. It's essential to the vibrancy of the borough.
Before we move on, does anyone, if any officer wants to chip in on anything, then please feel free to put your hand up. If no, okay. Councillor Raper. Councillor Maney.
Thank you. Are you asking how quickly that programme will be rolled out?
No. How quickly are they repaired?
Well, with this new system, the repairs should be, all but instantaneous. At the moment, before the CMS system, it literally required somebody to report a fault, a member of the public, or we would have to wait till one of our own officers or contractors identified a fault. The whole point of this system is to tell us when there is a fault with a street light, and we can respond much more quickly.
Good. So it is happening. Oh, sorry, I should be doing that, shouldn't I? 4.17.
I don't think that has been reported to Cabinet yet. Is that coming future Cabinet, Matt? It hasn't come yet, has it?
The supported bus services report, it was planned to come to January and has been pushed back to February meeting, so it will be presented then.
Thank you. And my last point, I think you've already answered, to be honest. I was just going to say, do we know how some of these projected projects will be affected by the budget? And of course, you have answered that. But that we don't know.
I think the answer is we don't know. Going back to, I spoke earlier about the ITB. I mean, that's only a small part of this report, but that is a direct grant from government. It is still subject to the same checks and balances as other spending in the council. But for me, the good news is it's not money that can be taken and diverted elsewhere. It is specifically for our transport policies, so our transport services. So I'm confident that on the majority of things in here we can deliver on. That's certainly what we'll be working to.
Thank you. And I also liked the fact that you highlighted in several places where things that our officers are doing bring in additional funding. So thank you for that.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Maney. My concerns are with the increased capacity with regards to transportation around our ports, especially being the Tilbury port. I understand that the Asda roundabout has a capacity of 19,000 vehicle movements per 24-hour capita, and it's far beyond that now. So in terms of reconstructing that road, the A1089 at Asda roundabout, what is the future for that? Could you enlighten us of what's got to happen to that roundabout? Because as we know, I mean, transportation's been increased vastly. With Tilbury 2 and so on and so forth. the London distribution park, Amazon. Something really needs to happen at the Asda roundabout to increase capacity for transport.
Councillor Maney.
Thank you, Chair. I can't give you a technical answer to that, but I mean, I think the amount of incidents that we've had recently, or not immediately recently, but in the near past of trailers overturning there, tells you that something has to be done. It's taking far too much traffic. It's not. Again, I'm giving a personal opinion. I'm not a highways officer, so I can't say that it isn't sufficiently configured for the traffic or the type of vehicles it's taking. But from what we see, that would seem to be the case. Again, I agree. That is a major entrance and exit into Tilbury and access to the ports. I think it needs to be reconfigured. Again, officers will be able to give you a more detailed answer on that, but it's key. It's essential that that is addressed.
Matt.
Thank you, Chair. I think just to clarify, that junction itself isn't Thurrock Council asset, it's National Highways asset. As part of the Freeport proposals, it's likely that junction is going to see a significant increase in traffic movement, as did when Tilbury 2 came in. We're going to be lobbying as part of that Freeport process for significant enhancement of that junction, and we're also looking at tying it into the local plan as well, because that is a key integral junction on the network.
Councillor Allen.
If I could just come back on that, thank you for that information. With regards to Highways England, which is now National Highways, in my experience dealing with them is very difficult in every manner. Even when it comes to the clean-ups of the carriageways. And now, just a short while ago, I put into National Highways some concern of the build-up of debris just around the Asda roundabout and the A13 facing slipway. The build-up of debris was that much, it was completely covering the curb. Now, if an HGV was to leave the road, instead of hitting the curb, it would freely go up on to the footpath. Now, if anyone was walking on that footpath, surely they'd be killed, because there's no way of stopping an heavy goods vehicle mounting that path with that build-up of debris. But when you put in concerns to National Highways, nothing's ever done. There's a gentleman, I believe, that Councillor Gledhill knows of, Keith Harrington, which is he's a bit of a community champion, really, and he goes along that carriageway and picks up rubbish himself. He's gotten to them a few times just recently to ask them to remove old traffic signs, but nothing's ever done. Why is it that when we ask Highways England or National Highways to do something, that they're not forthcoming with it?
I can't answer for National Highways, but part of the process is that they have a contractor that undertakes that kind of work for them, which is Connect Plus Services. So it's something that can be more directly raised with Connect Plus if there's no kind of feedback and come back from National Highways contact. So I've just making a note of the points you've expressed this evening, and I'll pass that on to the Connect Plus guys and copy in the relevant National Highways colleagues as well, just highlighting the fact that you haven't been getting a response, and we can see if we can get some additional feedback. I'll also look at what is the kind of adopted process, because if you go into kind of an individual, sometimes that doesn't work, does it, in these big firms that you have to go through a customer services kind of process. So maybe just clarify that with them as well, just so that we've got a couple of alternatives, a couple of options to highlight these issues to them.
Councillor Gledhill.
Thanks. And following on from Councillor Allen's statements and questions, they were actually supposed to be out last weekend along that stretch, and they weren't again. And I've got a number of, I've been down there with Mr Harrington on a number of occasions in the past, and I went down there myself not so long back, and I've seen fewer signs in our own highways yards than I've seen up and down that particular stretch of road. It seems to be, finish whatever they're doing and just leave it there. Quite frankly, they should be done for fly tipping. but personal opinion. Anyway, sorry. Also to follow on from Councillor Raper as well, it was going to be my first thing about the use of acronyms in here without full explanations. You know, I know what ITB is. I'm sure every member here does, and every officer. But I'm sure there's going to be at least one resident out there that's watching this with awe and gusto that's not going to know. So obviously for the future. But onto the report itself. So point one, network management. Fantastic issuing 892 fixed penalty tickets for non-compliance of the permit conditions. But how has that manifested into an improvement or speeding up of roadworks? I know some of these are retrospective because obviously officers and I have spoken in the past where suddenly roadworks are sprung up without consent and we've issued, but has that actually physically had an impact in reducing the amount of time that insert name of body is actually working on the road?
Councillor Maney?
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether it has any direct impact on the work. What I think it does do is send a message that these utilities, these people who work on our roads, have to cooperate with us. We need so that we can minimise the impact on residents, so we can see the quality of their work. As I say, I don't know what impact it has on the actual outcome of highways works. I can't see there's any direct link personally. I think it's really about addressing unacceptable behaviour.
It's just obviously when it was introduced, it's one of those things to make sure they didn't string it out for 4 weeks instead of the 2 weeks and so on. So I'll just be interested, perhaps it's for an update at a later stage. Next one is on 4.8, page 20, the active travel consultation on Branksome Avenue. I know that's taken place and the proposals weren't accepted by residents. I'm not entirely sure if that's going to go forward again or not in a different format. Is it? Do you know?
Branksome Avenue?
Yeah.
No.
Excellent, thank you. 4.12, Tilbury Cycle Hub. It seems to me that, obviously it's great that it's increased its opening times and it's increased its revenue by 100%, but again, I can't see any quantitative measurement of what its success is other than it's sold more bikes or more bike parts. I just really want to know what the concept was. Is it reaching the expectations? And is it having a direct impact on cycle users in the borough, i.e. having an increase of them or making those using it more safe?
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, the information that I've had on that is that it's gone from success to success. I think the fact that it's open for longer now, it's reaching more people, as it says in there, that is a measure of its success. Whether it's changing people's habits, whether it's actually not forcing but prompting more people to cycle and forego cars, will we ever know? I think, is it in the right location? I think that's also something I've questioned in the past. But the information I've got is that it is making an impact. It's allowing people who perhaps might not otherwise be able to afford a cycle or have access to a cycle or understand, a modern cycle. That's a place for them to go and get more involved in cycling. I'm sure we can. I hope we'll be able to bring forward, if you're asking for that, specific figures that measure in more detail how many people it's served, whether that's had some kind of impact in travel modes. If you're asking for that, we can bring it forward. But all I can say is that from the feedback I've had from officers is that it's gone from near closure to being very popular and in high demand.
Which again is great, as you say, is a measure of success. Going from 2 days and increasing your turnover by 100%, I'm sure there's a lot of businesses out there that'd be happy with that. It's whether or not it meets the criteria and has exceeded the output expected for the funding that government gave us to open it up. It's an odd question. It's probably not something that you can answer. Maybe one of the officers. It might not even fall under the remit of this committee. But 4.2. EV charging contracts, I know there's parts of that later on in the meeting, but are we? Obviously, we've just had the new place in Tilbury built, Beaconsfield. So you've got 34, 38 parking spaces underneath. There's not one EV parking point, which means all of those residents there are not in a position to buy ever an electric vehicle. Do you know if there's some way that we are morphing this into our planning policy to make sure that not just one or two, but a significant number of EV points are being delivered, as obviously the government's looking at the target in, 12 years' time, to only be selling new EV vehicles?
Yeah, thank you. As you said, I mean, in the integrated transport block that you'll be considering later, and in this year's cycle, it's obviously been a key theme of that programme. But I think, to be honest with you, it's something we have to look at in the local plan as well. The local plan isn't just about delivering houses, it's about sustainability, and I think you're right. Those kind of, if we want people to rely more on electric vehicles, then we need to make it easy for them. Certainly at the moment, the focus is on providing charging points in central locations, areas like town centres, rather than, I think it's fair to say, in actual individual streets or residential areas, but that is something that has to follow. I think at the moment we're primarily focused on providing those charging points at strategic locations. How you then disseminate more charging points out into communities and individual streets, I think that's probably something we're going to have to deliver via the planning process. I mean, the cost alone is not something I think that the service can deliver. It's going to need a lot more resource and a lot more planning.
Thank you. I know quite a bit about Connect Curb, having met them in my previous role, and some of the ideas they've got bringing forward for electric charging they're really quite fantastic. No longer plugging them into a pole, but having induction charging and stuff like that. So I would actually be interested, again with the briefing note, it doesn't need to come back, where these new points are going to go and what impact that they will have. On the passenger transport bit, you said obviously we're still rolling out the replacement of the bus shelters. When they go in, will they be going in with the seats this time, and there not being a massive delay between the shelters going in and then weeks or months later the seats going in? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'm assuming you're referring to specifically Gracetown, the Gracetown Centre.
Well, that one was the one, obviously, that everyone sticks in mind. It's whether the rest of them are, everything's arriving at the same time.
As far as I'm aware, that is the only example where that happened. That's something I did raise with officers at the time, and I received what I think is a satisfactory explanation for that. I think of the other shelters that have gone in, as far as I'm aware, the shelters and the seating have gone in hand in hand. So I think that was an isolated incident. If it wasn't, it's not. I've had no other incidents brought to my attention. So I hope I can give you an assurance that the answer is yes.
Thank you, because oddly enough, I had this question from a resident about 3 weeks ago when they noticed that a new one had gone in and everything had gone in. So I thought we'll make sure if we got it right there, we're still getting it right elsewhere. You covered lakeside cruisers and the HGV enforcement. I think that is a point to be congratulated on for the officers. I know actually Mr Harrington and others would complain regularly about the problem down at Tilbury Fault, and now they've said it's all but done, which is, whichever way around you measure it, if residents are saying, oh no, we don't really see it as a problem now, it's a success. So I think that needs to be specifically congratulated. 13.16, notice statutory parking appeals process. They received however many they received. Do we know how many were actually successfully appealed, and how many of those the appeals were rejected, and if they went on to the next stage I can't remember the name of the outside body, if they also rejected it? Again, if you haven't got it to hand, then it can come as a briefing note.
Councillor Maney.
Thank you. I mean, that's an operational issue. I also don't day-to-day manage the amount of parking appeals we get and how many are successful. But I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure we can get that information. It'll be readily available.
No, I wouldn't expect you to know that off the top of your head at all, but I think it's, again, it's one of those of interest. And the other one, again, is probably operational, but it's fantastic to see that you got implemented the automatic number plate reader handheld devices to obviously help improve the officers being able to do their job. Do you know, or do the officers know, whether that's linked in with the police's ANPR system? So if there's an abandoned vehicle, for instance, there was an abandoned vehicle in my ward over Christmas that the police were very interested in, and they came and removed following complaints to me from residents, and then obviously on to officers. So do you know if the two link, or whether they sit side by side, remote from each other?
I don't think they do. Again, I could be wrong, but I think this is purely to better aid the services that we provide. The parking services manager will be able to give a definitive answer on that. But as I say, I think they're not linked to that system.
Thanks. And finally, Chair, I've got to say this is much better than the way we used to deal with cabinet member reports. It's so much easier to get questions. You think I probably asked 8 or 9 questions, which would have been 4 times more than what would have been asked at a full council. So I think this is shown a real success, and thank Councillor Maney for the successes within his team. And when you start putting, as you said right at the beginning, when you start putting the numbers out there of how big our road network is and how much we have to do and how much we've repaired, I think it does go to show that when people complain about potholes, they're more likely to get filled at the moment in Thurrock than probably anywhere else in the country. So I think that's a real good measure of success and should be congratulated. Thank you.
Councillor Watson.
Sorry, Councillor Gledhill took half of my questions,
Great,
so not really happy about that there. Though. One of the things I did want to ask you about was the EV points. I totally agree, in the local plan we need to think about when we go planning, getting new developments, that we need to put this sort of stuff in. However, we've also got a hell of a lot of estates that's been built up over the course of the years that haven't got anything put in. So can I get your support in that we can do a bit of modelling around what that would require to get EVs in? Because I've got quite a few of my residents now asking me they want electric cars, but they haven't got anywhere to charge them. So if I can have your support on that, that'd be fantastic. In terms of the car cruising, you knew I was going to bring it up. There wasn't a doubt. So apparently the weight of the MP is now behind it and has sent an email out to every resident on the estate. Well, sent a letter out and to make it a designated area. Now, we've got a meeting on Tuesday, so can we discuss and take that up? But one of the things that I also wanted to know about the traffic around Lakeside itself is Councillor Kelly here has really got the bite to get the A13 slip road sorted. Do you know where we are on that?
Councillor Maney.
Thank you. Taking the first question about electric vehicle charging points. The challenge is how do you... I've been contacted by individuals. I've seen emails from individuals who specifically want a charging point outside their home. It'd be lovely to think that we'll arrive at a time in the future where, we can satisfy those kinds of requests, but we have to be realistic. The idea that with tens of thousands of residents, we can literally go around putting charging points outside the homes of people who request them. I don't think we're going to be at that point any time soon. Without considerable central government investment, we're just not going to be able to, as people request them, supply charging points outside people's homes. But I come back to what I said earlier. We do need to make them as accessible as possible, and I think we're on the right path there. Not only via the local plan, but also when it comes to the ITB, you'll see that we're focusing on electric vehicle charging points as part of that. That is one of the main areas of focus moving forward. So I can't say to you that yes, I fully support the idea that we'll all arrive soon. We'll be in a position where we can put individual points outside individual homes. I think that's probably a bit fanciful, but I fully support any measures which make them as accessible as possible.
I don't think I'm asking you for every single home, but to have points on the estates, maybe 5 or 6 of them would be great, to help out.
That is the point of the planning process. I mean, in terms of existing estates, again, areas, strategic locations within those estates is what we are focusing on. But how do you decide that one road in the residential area is the place it should go? If you take, for example, Lockington, putting aside the shopping centre, if you would say, right, that's phase one, we look at strategic hubs, now we're looking at getting them into the heart of residential communities, I wouldn't like to be the person who prioritises what is the residential street or streets you get them into. I hope you know there is a mechanism for looking at that, but I think it's a bit of a conundrum really to move on to a second phase where you start putting them into already established residential communities and how you prioritise what roads get them or what roads don't.
Councillor Watts, before we come back in, I'm going to bring Matt Ford in on that.
Oh, right, sorry, I forgot you.
Thank you, Chair. My team's been responsible for implementing the EV programme over the last couple of years. There's a little bit of information I can disseminate. So in terms of the planning process, it's right, it's been included in the local plan as a suite of policies. In the interim, we've got the parking strategy, which identifies a requirement for developers to provide passive provision, which is basically not the charging point per se, but the electrical infrastructure under the ground so that a charging point can be put in when there's a requirement for it. Because we have to acknowledge that whilst EV is on an upward trend, there's still not a lot of people that have got them in this area. So the passive provision is there as a stopgap mechanism until the local plan comes forward, which specifically dedicates charging facilities in those communal parking areas for flatted areas and stuff like that, and also makes reference that off-street parking for properties have to provide those charging facilities. That's coming forward as part of the local plan. Moving over to the EV charging tender that we've got with Connected Curb, we've been working very hard with the Office of Zero Emission Vehicles, it's OZEV, which is government funded. We've submitted a bid for up to 60% of the funding required for EV charging facilities. And as Councillor Maney has said, this is focused around local centres in the first instance to try and drive that demand to get people to use the local centres to charge their cars, use the facilities to hopefully bring a bit more interaction into those areas. And they are mainly centred around town centres such as Corringham Town Centre, Grays Town Centre, South Ockenden and places like that. There's about 13 in total that we've put a bid in for. The bid structure is changing next year, so they're moving away from you submitting a bid and then they assess it and then they grant it. They're actually looking at properties within the area that don't have access to off-street parking, and they're inviting authorities to apply for on-street parking provision for those residents that don't have access to off-street parking. And we're using our partnership with Connected Curb, who have very good data analytics, so they identify where EV ownership is, so they know where the demand is, and then we can actually pinpoint a charging point, not necessarily directly outside the house, but in the local vicinity, so they can get access to it. And it also takes into consideration anyone that is interested in getting an EV as well, that we can actually try and get the charging facilities in around the time that they're looking to get their vehicle as well. So there's quite a lot of work that we've undertaken so far in the background to try and promote this. The only thing that is a problem is at the moment the OZEV funding does not allow us to bid for infrastructure on private land. So where you've got housing developments with off-street parking for flatted developments, we can't actually secure any funding to provide those facilities, and it's really seen that the managing companies are responsible for that provision. But as I said, until the local plan has advanced fully to really push and drive for EV charging facilities to be provided, we're kind of stuck in a bit of limbo on that point. I hope that information is enough for you to digest and allay any concerns.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you. Do we know how many we've already got in the borough?
At the moment, we have commissioned 2 locations with 4 charging points. and that's directly funded by the council. That's not part of the OZEV fund. And they are to replace the ones in Argent Street and Canterbury Parade in South Ockenden. And as I said, we've got a bid in at the moment for 13 locations with a total of around about 70 charging points in those 13 or so locations.
Can I ask
Councillor
just one more
Watson.
question? So my final question is well, one before, but is the A13 actually finished? And if it's finished, what is the cost? Because we still haven't got that. Do you know, Councillor Maney, at all?
I'll allow you to respond, Councillor Maney, but I'm not sure that's your portfolio.
You're quite right, Chair. It's a regeneration matter. When you say not finished, well, it is when I drive along it, yeah.
So it looks absolutely fine, apart from some of the lights not on. So I'm just wondering, is it? So if it's not your portfolio, apologise. So I look over this as it is their portfolio, and is the A13 finished? And is there a final cost?
Peter, yep.
It's not a scheme I'm responsible for, and none of my colleagues are here, but it's not finished as I understand it, because we're still waiting for some information to come across for us to then take over the maintenance of it. So at this stage, it's not finished. It's
Okay.
I think they're just tying up loose ends, such as the street lighting, as you say. I think there's a power issue to that that's got to be resolved, but it's not within Councillor Maney's or our area.
No, that's fine.
Do you want to come in?
I did. I don't want to say too much about it because I say it's not my remit. But I did. If you're talking specifically about the street lighting, this is what I've been told. There is an issue with obtaining parts necessary to make them go live, which is linked to COVID apparently. So that's the information I've been given. Is that the lighting network? It's down to an issue with obtaining the necessary parts to make them go live. The information I'm relaying. Make of that what you will, but that's the information I've received.
Okay, and finally,
Sorry, can I just come in now? I've heard exactly the same thing, but we were told that in a meeting a good 3 months ago. So have they still not managed to get the parts?
I would think, judging by the fact the lights aren't working, the answer is no. But as I say, I mean, I can only relay the information that I've been given. That's a national issue. It's not just unique to us, but that remains the official position.
Councillor Watson.
And finally, I always end up on a positive note. The road safety is, I think, is quite good, really. So well done.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair. You mentioned car cruising. Did you ask a specific question about that? Because I didn't.
No, we'll cover that on Tuesday, I think.
Yeah.
It's not for this meeting. We'll cover
You were
that
just making note of it.
Just make note of it that the MP has now got her back in.
Yeah, well, I mean, our point of clarification, she hasn't just got her back in. She's been on the point she was elected campaigning for some solution there. I don't want to speak for her, but she's been out with the police and she's been on patrol. So, you know, she's been somebody who's been championing that cause, I think, longer than some people have been in elected office here. So she hasn't just arrived on the issue. She's been campaigning for that for a very, very, very long time.
But went very, very quiet on it for the residents for quite a while. So at the moment, all I'm saying is she's now sent a letter to everybody. We'll cover that on Tuesday. So I'm also campaigning very, very hard for our residents now that actually live there. Thanks.
I don't think there's any dispute about that. You have been campaigning hard, as have all the other councillors for the West Thurrock area and the Chafford 100 area. I'm not disputing that, but just for again clarification, I don't share the meeting we're talking about on Monday, but I don't think we'll be discussing an MP's letter or that. It's not relevant to our discussion on Monday.
I'm not going to get into the debate here because this is not the place to get into that debate, but there's things in that letter that I think could work, and that's what we'll be debating on Tuesday. We'll have that conversation on Tuesday. You haven't seen the letter? Oh, right. Well, then you know that we'll
We'll
talk
wrap
about
up
that in Saturday.
this part of the meeting now, and we'll go to Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. I think there was another question in there about the east-facing slips as well.
Yeah, about the A13.
Yeah, so sorry, Ben, just to add on that. So page 21, Obviously, we had the briefing note. Obviously, we put that fantastic business case together. National Highways have come back and said, obviously, they're concerned about it having a direct impact on the strategic road network, but obviously we know that it already does have that impact based on the westbound access. So that's just massively disappointing that they're not really acknowledging that as an issue. You know, the council's position should be that we need east-facing slips. We knew that back in the 1980s, it should have been built. It all just come down to cost. So how on earth we can be in this scenario where they're still not acknowledging? And as for alternatives, there are none. So it would just be interesting to see what your thoughts are on that. Thank you.
Councillor Maney.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I've always supported the need for east-facing slips, as you say. There's a need for it now. That's before any growth in the Lakeside Basin. That's before we look at developing sites like Arena Essex and expanding retail. It is disappointing that National Highways haven't bought the argument. I think the alternatives that they've put forward don't come close to solving the problem there, or won't come close to meeting future demand. We need east-facing slips. Again, it's something that Councillor Cox will be able to give you more of a briefing on, but for my part, I'm sold on the idea that we need it. And quickly, it's something we should have had, as you rightfully point out. They should be there already.
Are there any further questions or comments? No. I just wanted to briefly make comment myself and thank the team, particularly the Highways Infrastructure Service. There's a little paragraph in here that mentions, the importance in the assistance and support that they gave when managing the impact of the Just Stop Oil head cases, and how the team engaged with stakeholders and moved swiftly to action to fill in the tunnels that they had created. I just wanted to pass on my thanks to that team and the great work that they do. But if no one else has any further questions, we will move on, because I don't think we have any recommendations for this. No. Okay, well, thank you for coming along, Councillor Maney. You're welcome to stay if you wish, but equally, if you want to leave, then please do. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the fees and charges pricing strategy. This can be found on page 43. And have we got Lee for this?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So the fees and charging pricing strategy report was taken to the last meeting. It was largely endorsed, save for two areas which related to building control fees and parking permits. So the report in front of you has been updated. Sections 5.4 relating to parking permits and 6.3 relating to building control. Chair, we have Mike and Jonathan here this evening in case there's any questions on that updated information, but otherwise the report is as printed, but happy to field any questions.
Thank you for the report, Lee. When it comes to the parking permit charges for those for homeowners, have we done any consultation with residents since the last meeting?
What I've been able to do is research. Sorry, Chair, my name is Michael Deneen. I realise that I'm new to this committee after being appointed, and I don't believe that we have engaged with the entire community around the permits at this stage. However, I have been able to gain some quite in-depth detail around the permits and suggesting how those values have come to fruition, really. So I'm happy to answer a number of questions around the permits themselves as well, if you would wish.
Okay, so I'm hearing that we haven't done any consultation with residents. The position that I set out at the last meeting was that instinctively I don't like these parking permit charges for homeowners for parking outside their properties. However, it's something that I could be moved on if sort of proper consultation was done with residents. My position remains the same. It's not something I'm comfortable with while we haven't done, in my view, sort of sufficient consultation with residents. I appreciate that was a bit of a statement. There's no question in that. But if you want to respond, then feel free.
Certainly, I will, Chair. I think what's important is to realise that parking permits are not a charge to park outside your home. They're actually used for twofold. So what it actually allows is priority parking for residents so that they are able to park outside their homes or nearby without interruption from things like commuters or other visitors taking over. And the prices that are being placed before you in this paper are extremely low. I've done a lot of research surrounding other boroughs in the area, and I have to say the closest to us is still 50% higher than what we would be charging, and it extends to over 400% cheaper than some of the other areas close by. So, first of all, the amount that we are proposing is relatively very, very small. The first one being £10, the second car being £20, and the third one being, I believe, an increase to £80. And I think it's important to remember that by doing that, residents will have the easier way of parking near or close to their properties, whereby enforcement is also a priority in that area. So if a resident does raise a concern with the council, we will be able to target those areas immediately. And that isn't just about being able to be charged to park outside your house, but it's actually being able to ensure that you can park, and when people do breach parking regulations, they will be dealt with as swiftly as very possible by the team.
Thank you for your response. Does anyone want to come in on Councillor Allen?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Michael. It's quite concerning, I think. I see it as a fee to park outside their own property, even though you refer to it as a priority parking, a charge to prioritise them to be able to park outside their own property, which is, I think, quite ridiculous. They've been parking outside their own properties for God knows how many years until the CPZ or the parking permits were introduced. Mainly, I understand, because of commuter parking forcing these parking permits to be introduced. So the current state that this council is in, it's for everyone to know. The debt that we're in, and I just see this as an exercise to claw back more money and put another stealth tax, if you like, onto our residents. So I'm not impressed at all. You refer to it being, let's see, where did I put it? Comparable to other boroughs. And again, we can use Southend Council if you like. How can we compare Thurrock to Southend Council? Southend Council is a bit more of a tourist destination as such. It's got vastly more seafront than what we've got, and it's more visited. So we can't really compare to that. And it also states on page 49, statutory guidance of local authorities is set by the Department of Transport, and it states that local authority parking enforcement should be self-financing, and it states that Secretary of State will not accept local taxpayers to meet any deficit. I think it's in that sentence already. I mean, if you'd like to come back on my comments, I'd welcome your comments.
Certainly. Thank you, Councillor Allen. Obviously, there was a number of issues that you raised there, and if I do miss any, please do come back to me, and I'll try and cover them off. In relation to the local areas and the various different authorities near us, we've picked Southend, and I simply picked that one because it is one of the lowest costing in the area, close to us. But there are significant other local authorities, such as Brentwood, 34 for the first car, Havering, 35, Rochford, £50, Castle Point, 52, and Chelmsford, which again is a bit different for us, I accept, is 26. So as you can see, the level of £10 is very relative, a low amount of money compared to other local authorities, and I do stand by that. We haven't I believe you used the word a cash grab. That isn't what this is about. And to refer these charges to the current position that the council face is probably naive, because this has been taking place for a lot longer. These discussions have been ongoing now for a long time, and a long time prior to any of the issues that the council have faced. So it isn't linked to that. It is a realistic policy, a realistic charge, one which has been thoroughly thought out and compared to other local authorities, and one which I stand by my officers coming to. In relation to your last point, I can't recall now. I do apologise. I was trying to write it down.
I mean, referring back to the controlled parking zones themselves, I feel that these parking zones were really forced upon residents, and it was forced upon residents by way of commuter parking, you know, and that's the only reason I believe that it was introduced throughout Tilbury, because of the commuter parking, which was it was terrible in some instances. I can tell you personally that my mum's housebound, and when we do occasionally take her out from her home that she's lived in since 1966, there was one day that we had to physically get her out of her wheelchair to get her through the garden gate where someone parked literally inches away from her gate. So that's the way they were parking prior to the controlled parking zones.
No, Councillor Allen, you know, the story you just told us there, that is partly why these things do come in. And you're quite right. But my point is that the whole thing has, in previous times, gone through a number of processes, and it has been accepted. And I don't think really in this meeting I can talk to plans that have been put in place many years ago. However, what I tried to raise in with you is that this really is not a stealth tax. There are no local authorities that near us that don't charge for a parking permit of sorts, and I reiterate that the levels that we are offering in this paper at £10 for the first car is significantly lower than anywhere else in our region.
Just a quick one, Chair.
Be a tad brief.
Yeah. Just a quick one. Just in reference to what Chair has said, I would support a full consultation on this to ask the residents what they actually want. Okay, and I'd expect a full consultation. Everyone that lives in them controlled parking zones are contacted directly. Okay, by way of letter.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'll take that away and inform the team. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Watson.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. First of all, has the Commissioners agreed this?
At this moment in time, I'm unsure if it's gone to the Commissioners itself. That sort of process isn't being conducted by myself, so I can find that out for you and keep you informed, or if Councillor Maney is aware.
Councillor Maney.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, they have seen this proposal and haven't objected to it.
The thing I'm worried about is that we're going to discuss this now, and to be quite frank, I'm against this. And then we're back here reviewing fees and charges in the next 3 or 4 months' time. So I don't want to come to that situation where we're having this conversation again. A couple of questions I really want to ask is, why is it so more expensive to get a third permit than it is to get a first and second permit? Why have you just gone from 20 to 80? And if my neighbour, and we're all going to give examples, they're both working and they've got 4 cars between them. So that's I'm assuming £190. And if I was in an HMO and they have 6 cars, how do the permits work? Is it on the individual room or on the property?
Unfortunately, I don't know that particular answer about the HMO, and it's a very good point and one that I most definitely will take away and find an answer for. And Chair, I'll give that update tomorrow because it's a very valid question. Because in essence, each of those rooms is an independent person. So I take your comment there, and I'll take that away. In relation to the third, the formula, I obviously don't have any of the formula for the third, but the concept of permits is twofold, and that is to promote the use of non-vehicular use. So although it is significantly higher, it is offset by if you only have 1 or 2 cars in your household, you're paying far, far less. So it does have that knock-in effect that perhaps people can start to look toward not owning so many vehicles, and that is part of the government's process within the permitting scheme.
Councillor Watson.
So one of the risks in this is that this is going to be for not every single private estate either, because you won't be able to do that. So what it does do is it then pushes, as Councillor Allen said, the cars that don't want to pay this onto the estates that don't pay that. And that's already happening on my estate. So for me, bearing in mind we're going through a cost of living crisis right now, which is an energy crisis, and the fact that the council are in financial difficulty, and the fact that they're going to get rises come to their rents and the service charges and their council taxes, I just think that I can't agree to this right now. I just think that it's not affordable for a lot of people.
Mike.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I take your comments on board, and I'll make a note of those and pass them forward, because I do know that this report will obviously go forward. So I acknowledge your comments that you don't agree with it. I just reiterate again that after extensive research of other areas and moving forward as an authority, we have tried to be as fair as possible on this, and the actual fees themselves are still relatively very, very low.
Councillor Gledhill.
Thanks, Chair. I think I'm probably the only person in the room that agrees in the sense of it's not a tax to park outside your home. It's actually having the ability to exclude a significant amount of the rest of the residents in the borough not to park outside your home. As I say, I live in a parking zone. I'm not a driver, so it doesn't directly affect me finance-wise. I do not agree that having an £80 charge for a third car is going to put someone off of owning a third car. We are not, Surrey or somewhere where someone's got their day car, they've got the weekend car, and they've got the flash car when the sunroof's down. Thurrock isn't that type of place. I also have neighbours that have got 4 cars and pay the extra permit because there is sufficient room in the street for them to park. And £80, it's an annoyance, but they're willing to pay it because all 4 of them have got different jobs on different shifts in different locations. So in my head, that's kind of a nonsense. And oddly enough, I kind of agree with Councillor Watson on that difference. Why? But equally, why is there a difference between Permit 1 and Permit 2? Surely, if we were going to implement this, and I'll come on to that in a minute, it should be done at a cost. So we know that if it costs £22 to issue a parking permit, we'll round up to £25, it's easy, whatever. That's your permit cost, it's 25 quid. What I don't agree with is the fact that because another authority is charging a certain amount, that's how much we should charge. If we were going to introduce this, I would expect it to, as Councillor Allen pointed out, is to make sure that other residents are not paying for that service through their council tax as a top-up. So, for instance, if we charge 30 quid and it actually costs £45 to issue, we should be charging £45. If it costs £10, we should be charging £10. Because next door's doing it, doesn't mean we should. It's that old, if your mate jumps off a cliff, would you do it too? It just seems a nonsense way of putting it together. But the reason I am opposed to the charging of it is because this has been in place, the free charging, for... I'm looking at Councillor Maney. It's a significant number of years. I think it was sort of 2000 and something, 2012. Yeah, it might be. Yeah, it obviously got newer zones, but back then it was brought in because the cost of collection was more than what we were actually getting in, which seemed to be a good enough saving. But we've had residents that have had this for so long now, for free, and indeed the last one that's put in my area, one of the benefits of it was for free, and that's why a lot of residents said yes, is now we're going to start charging them. And I think if we're going to do that, then we do need to give them, that whole area, the option of saying, take it away. Because I think it's unfair to put something in place for free and then take it away 1, 2, 5, 10 years later. So I'm not opposed to it wiping its face. I think, you know, extra services like this should wipe its face, but not when it's been free for so long. So I really would want to see, however the mechanism be, whether it be go to Cabinet and Cabinet say, yes, we're going to charge for this, but before they charge for that, to give everybody the option to say, I'm not paying 35 quid, or however much it's going to be, to park outside my home. I'll take the risk of, you know, commuters or shoppers or school users, as I know Councillor Watson probably suffers from as well, parking up outside people's homes when they're picking up children. I get directly opposite mine as well. So I'm not opposed, but equally, if it's going to be in there, it's going to have to be better worked out, and there needs to be the option to opt out.
Do you want to come back on that, Mike?
I can take that forward for it. It's not a direct question. I understand that. It's more of an observation of the situation, and that's something that I can take away and discuss in relation to the cost of the service. It's very difficult. I have tried. Very difficult to break down the actual cost of what it would be to just run the permit section of the whole enforcement. But just to give all members an idea of the cost of that service, I have been able to break down some figures in relation to some of the steps along the way. So our cost for our case management software system that we utilise to issue all of the permits, etc. Now, admittedly, that's not 100% used just for that. It's used for a whole of enforcement, but that's £40,000 a year, and these are very close estimates, sums of money. And then since March this year, we've issued and entered 6,342 permits. So someone has to do that. They have to check the application themselves. That takes an actual resource to do that. That's not, although the permit's online, that part isn't. So that in itself would cost in the region of £17,000 for the year, across the whole year by that full-time employee. And then having one FTE, so one CEO out on the streets with all of the kit, all of the remedies, all of the salary, etc., are on costs. That's coming at just shy of 50,000. So as you can see, even the money that is going to be generated by the permits themselves won't actually cover the complete cost. It very much is a contribution to the whole effort of parking enforcement and trying to maintain some level of fairness around parking, etc. And as you mentioned, not necessarily to park outside your home, but to stop others abusing that position as well. So hopefully those figures can assist you in some way, but it was very difficult for me to break down how much each permit would cost per permit.
Sorry, the only thing I missed out there was actually the repairs to the zone. I know we've had a number of the signs stolen over the past sort of 2 years or so, and they don't come cheap. It does seem to me, what's that? I'm just taking 25%, 70, 80, you're looking at £80,000 you'd need to raise. It just seems that £80,000 is going to come from somewhere else, or parts of somewhere else, if you don't raise that full 80,000. But again, I'm still not happy with it being introduced where they've had it free.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Raper.
Thank you. This is moving slightly away from it, but it's something I have said at numerous meetings, and I'm sure people in here will have heard me say it. Is there any provision for people who are struggling to access the online system? I've got several residents who simply haven't been able to do it, and I sat for some time with a gentleman in the library and helped him do it on one of the computers there. But I still feel there are a lot of people who can't access it online. So I don't know if you've got an answer to that, but I just wanted it recorded yet again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. In response to that, it's not been raised to me personally, but I've only been in the role for a short amount of time. However, I'll take that away and I'll find out if there is an ability to put an application in through the post as well as electronically, and if there isn't, maybe that's something that I can take away and work with with the team. Thank you.
Thank you.
The whole report.
Sorry, in that case, Chair.
Councillor Gledhill.
Apologies. This is more of a query than anything. 5.9 highways infrastructure. These charges have increased between 0 and 14% and have been benchmarked against other neighbouring authorities. I couldn't quite work out what highways infrastructure charging would be. And again, why are we using next door, for want of a better term, as the comparison, rather than working out how much it actually costs and charging plus whatever we need on top of that.
Peter?
That'd be my area. So yeah, so highways infrastructure. So that the cost in that varies. So it's either permitting charges for roadworks, which are a statutory price and set by legislation. It could be charges for vehicle crossings, pavement licences, scaffolding, hoarding. So it covers a raft of charges. Really, it's just anything really, basically on the highway with respects to furniture or works, roadworks.
It's much clearer for me now. It's just more how much it actually costs the council to provide that service, and are we making sure that all of that is passed on to those that need to get those permits and so on, rather than just saying, hey, we can charge X amount of money, so we're going to charge the same.
Yeah, so we try to. So there's no national sort of charging mechanism or anything that stipulates what we need to charge for these things. So generally, we try to base our charges on what the national average is or what people are doing. So the only way we can do that is looking at what neighbouring authorities do. The charges generally that apply to residents within the highways infrastructure team, we haven't really tampered with them or looked to increase them. The ones that directly affect residents, say the VXO, vehicle crossings. They've stayed stagnant because that's what the residents are paying. But charges then that affect potentially developers or businesses or statutory undertakers, they're the charges mainly that have been adjusted and brought up. So we're trying not to pass that cost on to the residents, but more onto businesses or not necessarily businesses, statutory undertakers and people like that, or developers.
Do we have any further questions on this report from members? It doesn't look like it. Mike?
Chair, sorry, if you may, just going back to Councillor Rayford's comment around your local residents that can't apply. Through the wonders of technology, I've been informed that if they were to contact the contact centre, they would complete that application for them, and then the permits would be sent out. Thank you for that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. That's remarkably quick, and the first time that question has been answered. So, contact centre. Thank you.
Okay. If there are no further questions or comments, we have recommendations for this report. And I just want a bit of clarification because the recommendation 1.1, I'm quite content with that because it simply says that we've noted and commented, which we have done. I just wanted to make sure that's correct, is written correct, and this won't be taken as approval wholly for all of this, just because obviously, as raised by members, there is still concern with regard to the parking permit, certainly on my part, until a form of consultation is done. Mike?
Thanks, Chair. You're quite right. This isn't a decision-making situation. It is just for you to air your views, scrutinise some of the decision-making and ask us questions, and that is what the recommendation represents.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gledhill.
Thank you, Chair. You could, of course, add in either 1.1A or 1.3, whatever way you want to do it. A separate recommendation that the Overview Scrutiny Committee disagreed with the proposals to increase the charges, and that the reasons why be given to Cabinet. Because obviously, having sat on Cabinet for a number of years, it's just saying yes, they've agreed, or no, they haven't agreed, and not having the context. I think this sort of puts the context in there and may well help Cabinet make the decision as they go forward. and understand the views of members, plus the impact that this would have. So perhaps if you want to put that extra recommendation in.
Yep, I'm certainly happy to add that in as 1.A. Do any other members have any comments on that before we go? Are you all right with that?
Can you just clarify the wording for me of this recommendation? If you are proposing a recommendation, someone will need to propose it and someone will need to second it.
So, sorry, Chair. If you're happy for me to put the proposal forward, I would say that the extra recommendation be that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee disagreed with the recommendation to charge for parking permits in the controlled parking zones, and the reasons as laid out through the discussion be given to Cabinet for their decisions, before the decision is made.
Are we all agreed on the recommendations?
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic.
Did you second that?
Yeah. Second that.
We'll move on to the last item of the agenda. This isn't in the pack. It was sent out later, so looks like everyone's got one. And this is the Integrated Transport Block Capital Programme, and for this I'm going to Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report sets out the Integrated Transport Block Programme and the funding that is provided by the Department for Transport on an annual basis to deliver that programme. It also sets out the highways maintenance block allocation and the programme, both for the 23-24 financial year. The report follows the broad strategic priorities set out within the Council's transport strategy, and within section 2.4 you can see the key areas in terms of the policy direction that is taken for prioritising and delivering the programme as set out as road safety engineering, safer routes to schools, area intervention programme, electric vehicle charging. Within the integrated transport block, they are the key areas that are focused on. In section 3.2, we provide a breakdown of how the funding is allocated across those policy areas, and in a couple of other areas of spend on the programme, and they're set out in terms of the policy areas and then the funding that is allocated across each of those for the annual programme to be delivered. As suggested, there is also an element of the maintenance programme that is prioritised and delivered with the funding that's allocated, and I'll pass over to Peter just to give you a quick summary of what's involved there.
Thanks, Matt. So you'll see in the programme, at the back there, the programme for the maintenance block allocation, as we term it. So we've been successful now for the last couple of years of achieving a band 3 on the incentive fund, which then means we accrue the maximum funding available. So on top of the 1.1 million, we get an extra 277,000, which I think we'll all agree is needed on our network. So the funding is ring-fenced to maintenance. As part of that incentive fund, we have to show that we've got an asset management, data-led approach to how we manage our network and life cycle planning. So the programme really is based upon that asset management approach, where we look at the condition of the network, we look at sort of the usage of the network, bus routes, HGV routes, and we try to come up with schemes that obviously tick them boxes as per the asset management policy, but also really target the roads that are in the most need. What we did find approximately 2 years ago, there was a reduction in DFT maintenance block allocation, where 25% was reduced. That was a national issue across all maintenance authorities. So, you know, the buck goes a little bit less further than what it used to. So it's important that we stick to these principles set out in the asset management policy on how we do it. We focus on A roads, B roads and unclassified roads, and the money split out to target them areas. Where we've been successful with internal bids previously, we've managed to divert, whereas we used to fund some of the bridges out of this block allocation, we've had a capital bid where we've managed now to fund the bridge work, so therefore we can focus more on carriageways and footways and the drainage side of things. The programmes in the back of the pack, I'm happy to take questions on any of it.
Thank you for the report and speaking on that, Matt and Peter. I'll go straight to committee to see if we've got any questions.
Members before I should have.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of drainage, you've mentioned drainage to our road infrastructure. I know that certain roads are not our remit. Again, I'd refer to a road just off of the 1089 in Tilbury, Thurrock Parkway, which leads into to the Asda. We've seen constant flooding of that, and also there's another road in question which has seen flooding, and it's been quite dangerous because it's outside of school. So there's been lots of concern coming in via parents about the flooding, and that's Lansdowne Road. Now, constantly I'm putting in inquiries regarding this, and constantly I'm being told by Transport Development that it's basically nothing to do with council. It's actually the water company, which is Anglian Water, I do believe. So it just seems that a lot of the road infrastructure is passed off to someone else. It's not our problem as such, Peter, and it's often referred to that council are in dialogue with the water company, but years on, nothing gets addressed. We've still got the same problem in Thurrock Parkway now for God knows how many years. Certainly as long as I've been a councillor, and decades. Again, Lansdowne Road, it's just not being addressed. The sewerage systems seem to be incapable of dealing with excess water on our road network. Peter.
Yeah. So there's a few issues there. So yeah, we know about Thurrock Parkway, and we are working with colleagues in the flood management team with respects to enforcement. It's far from simple, unfortunately. You've got my assurance we don't just pass the buck. If it's an issue off of our network, but it's directly affecting our network, we do try and engage with partners because they are our partners. But we have limited leverage sometimes in which we can enforce them to act. But we've recently, with the creation of the flood management team now, we are looking at enforcement. It's something we've not been able to do previously, but certainly over the last couple of years, we've managed to get enforcement done on a few other long-standing sites. Thurrock Parkway, I've asked, is prioritised because I appreciate the importance of that link, obviously with Asda, and then you've got the other businesses in there. I saw the photos with regards to when we had the ice, with the sitting water there. So we are trying to resolve that, but with drainage, it's one of them you can't see. It's never a simple thing because you can't see it. Repairing a road's easy generally because we can see what we're dealing with. But with drainage, they're generally old antiquated systems. You get development, and as over time with all the development, it adds puts more pressure on the system, and the system originally isn't designed to take the water that it's taking. So Lansdowne Road, for instance, that's part of the reasons. The system isn't designed with all the developments gone on over the years to necessarily cope with that. And also, there's could be potential issues with Anglian Water where our system then feeds into it. And that's then beyond our control again, but we work with Anglian Water on that. Thurrock Parkway is more of a maintenance issue with the ditches, but where that's behind the properties, originally we thought it was Network Rail, but it transpires now that each of them individual properties each have a responsibility to maintain their section of the ditch. So potentially we've got to take enforcement action against not just one property, but up to maybe 10, 12 different properties at the same time. And with enforcement, it's never quick and easy, unfortunately. So, but you do have my assurance, we are actioning it, and we're trying to get it sorted as quickly as possible. But these things can take time.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. Peter, again, don't you think that it's not a great setup with drainage going into ditches, unless we've got a massive area, a massive ditch to cover all this water. It's just not viable. It's never been viable really at Thurrock Parkway to rely merely on ditches. Why can we not tap into the main drain system to carry this rain surface water away? Why are we relying on ditches?
Because we have to then feed into an Anglian water system, and Anglian water, for similar reasons on Lansdowne Road, their systems are generally antiquated systems that are at capacity. So you therefore then need to look to Anglian Water to upgrade their systems to accommodate that runoff that's in there. So they generally don't approve additional water going into it. There is an Anglian Water system further down towards the 1889 roundabout, but we wouldn't be able to connect into that without their permission, and they will not give permission because it's then going to add capacity issues to them and potentially even the 1889. With regards to ditches, a lot of Tilbury, and even parts of Ockenden and stuff like that down into the Mardyke. It's just historically, that's how a lot of these areas used to be drained, into land drains and then out into the estuary and stuff like that. It's just historically how they're designed. On new developments now, and again, it's not in my area, but colleagues, I'll probably cover it for them, there's a stipulation now on new developments where they've got to have sustainable drainage as part of a development, so it puts less pressure onto the broader drainage network. But unfortunately, what we've got in Thurrock, we've got a lot of historical development it's too late. It's already putting that pressure on it. Anglian Water also have the same challenges as us as a highway authority. They're a maintaining authority as well. I think it's well documented that that their pressures that they're under with regards to maintaining their antiquated system. It's tricky. It's tricky because it's all about maintenance.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of assurance, what assurance can you give, people, residents, regarding Thurrock Parkway, regarding Lansdowne Road, that a resolution is going to be found, to tackle these historic ongoing issues that we see?
Well, certainly on Thurrock Parkway, it has to be found. It can't continue the way it is. It's, I've seen it out there. I've been out there. We can't continue because whilst that water's sitting there with the temperatures we're getting as well, it's destroying the road surface. From a maintaining authority, I want to get that sorted. So, and we are pushing for that to be done. It will get done. What I can't tell you is the time frame on doing that, because it relies on a complicated, convoluted enforcement route we've got to go down. But as I say, we're working with colleagues in the flood management team to get that done, and everyone knows that that's got to be a priority to get done. So, we get it done as soon as feasibly possible.
Okay, a quick one from myself. We've got the table that starts on page 3 and ends on page 4 that just sets out the ITB capital funding allocation. I was just wondering if you could sort of expand, give a bit more detail on how each of these sections come to have the number allocated to them that they do. I know the report mentions that consultation is made with the portfolio holder, and in this instance, funding was increased for road safety engineering and the AIP. And you've mentioned about how data is used. It's a data-led approach. Now, personally, I'm not the biggest electric vehicle enthusiast, so when I sit here and I see £150,000, I think, oh well, I think that'd be better there, better here, better. So could you just take me through the process as to how each of these categories end up where they actually end up?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. So there is a data-led approach to identifying the areas of intervention that need to be prioritised across our entire programme. We look at issues around the data relating to incidents and accidents on the road network to inform road safety engineering. We also look at the criteria for safe routes to schools to be provided in terms of issues for walking, cycling, any barriers that occur there, and also how we work collaboratively with local schools in terms of bringing forward travel plans so that we work collaboratively to bring forward active travel and sustainable options. So a mix of criteria used. Similarly, with area intervention programme, it looks at set criteria again in terms of certain category of roads, and then different data, and Matt will probably be able to provide a bit more in terms of the nuts and bolts of that. But in terms of the EV charging allocation being the figure that it is, that specific example is because of the funding that Matthew alluded to earlier in terms of the OZEV grant funding that can be provided to local authorities at the moment. There is an opportunity there for local authorities to take advantage of that OZEV or Levi funding. Therefore, if the local authority puts more funding towards EV charging, it can gain more benefit from the grant as well. So, as you said, through kind of officer engagement and conversation with portfolio holder, we've looked at where the priorities and where the funding allocation is most suitably kind of allocated for this year. Matt, I don't know if you want to say a bit more about the detail in terms of some of the data-led approach behind some of what we do.
Yep, certainly. Is it all right if I share my screen just so I can show you a few graphs? So bear with me 1 second. Hopefully this will work. Wait a minute. Oh, it's not very clear. I'll try and zoom in as much as I can. So this is in the report as an appendix item, I believe, and this is just a bit more detail to what's in the report. There we go. So we've got some main policy areas which members may recall were brought towards you in around about 2020 and 21 for the various items. They're ranging from road safety engineering, safe routes to school, EV charging facilities, and area intervention programme. These are broken down into specific project areas for us to work on. So, for example, road safety engineering is all the main routes in Thurrock, so from the A13 right the way down to your some B road networks like B186, West Thurrock Way, and places like that. Safer routes to school is identified as areas around the 53 schools that Thurrock's got. And then we've got area intervention programme, which kind of is all those areas that are not main routes, they're residential streets that don't generally get the treatment that is needed, because we've always focused on the main routes because they're always the ones that attract more accidents. When we assess these, they're all based on the personal injury accident record that's provided to us by the police, and we interrogate that information and we work out a priority list in accordance with that. If I go to my next, so in terms of working on accidents, that's a little bit clearer for everyone. So this is just as a bit of an aside, the DFT have identified a cost of society score rating for the total average cost of accidents that occur in the United Kingdom. So these figures are average costs of what an accident of the severity costs society if it occurs. So, for example, a fatality will cost society around £2.2 million, and that can be the cost of the NHS, fire service, police, the cost of traffic jams, goods and services not being delivered on time. It factors in all of that element. And you can see, looking at serious, that drops down considerably, even though a serious accident is, by definition, quite serious. It's anything that is up to loss of life. that drops considerably down to 261,000, and then a slight accident, which is where someone might attend hospital, not stay as an inpatient, get shipped off back home as an outpatient. That again drops down considerably to about 26,000. So on that basis, we then factor it in accordance with those costs. So we make sure that if there's a fatality, we give that the highest rating when we do the assessment. And then what we do is on the assessment route, we then collect all that data of those incidents, and then we give it a factored score at the end of it, and that works out the priority. In terms of that looks, and apologies, it's not going to come out quite clear because we've got loads of information. I'll zoom in. We'll look at the top one there, which is Stamford La Hope A13, which is the road from Stamford Interchange to the Five Bells Interchange. Over the research period, we've had 33 accidents, 1 fatality, 6 serious, 26 slight, and it's given it a factored score of 58 using that algorithm there. Compare it to the next one down, which has got a factored score of 46, which I believe is Junction 31, which has had 5 serious and 26 slights and a factor score of 46. So that's how we prioritise it, based purely on the statistics of personal injury accident. This is the standard that we've used since around 1997, and it's about that it was part of the government's initiative to reduce killed and seriously injured on UK roads over a 10-year period, and we've just kept that process going since the end of that period of 2008. There's a slight tweak that we've done with the area traffic calming or the area intervention programme, which is whilst we do factor in the accidents, because these areas are lower category, they don't tend to get incidents occur on them, and the areas that we've looked at are all different sizes. We've just made a slight change to it where we've tried to work out a accident per kilometre rating. So if you've got a large area with a small number of accidents but more than a smaller area, invariably those larger areas always attract more attention, whereas if you do it this way, by doing it by per kilometre, you're levelling the playing field across all of those areas. And you can see ones that are highlighted are the ones that are on the list for treatment next year, which is Grays Riverside and Ockenden West. Just to briefly tell you members of the areas, so this is a graphic of the areas that we work to. So there's 28 areas in the borough, and these are all bounded by major road network. So we've looked at the areas from the perspective of we want to go from one major road network to another, mop up all of the minor road networks in the middle, excluding the major road network from it, and you can see, and very pretty graphic of colour coordination, but there's 28 areas there that we look at. Just to focus in on the bottom there, you've got, for example, Tilbury, you've got Tilbury East, and you've got Tilbury West. So St Chad's Road is the boundary, and we've tried to tie them into 2 distinct areas so that we're not overloading the programme with a really big area, just trying to make them a bit more appropriate. So I hope that's a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of how we prioritise at present with those elements. One thing I will say is with the EV charging facilities, as Matt said, it's really just to factor in that the government's grant funding is a limited budget. They've said that there is no time limit, but they're saying once the money's spent, the money's spent, and they're trying to encourage authorities to maximise their incentive in getting that grant funding through, and that's why we've proposed to bring forward next year's projected budget, which is 75,000, into this year, so we can try and maximise that grant figure, which is currently 60%, is likely to drop down in successive years as the money starts to peter out. So we're just trying, with that, we're trying to maximise the gain and build on the fact that we haven't been putting EV charging facilities in for a number of years, and we need to really catch up with everybody else.
Thank you for that, Matt. Councillor Gledhill?
I'm going to stick to this bit and get back to the bit I was going to raise a bit earlier. I'll be honest with you, the EV charging point, other than the 150,000, which you've now explained, was the only part of pretty much all of this that I've got any comprehension of how it's really worked out. And I think not necessarily this committee, but perhaps a subcommittee or someone perhaps can have a look at this as a whole, because I'm just, it's not an over. I'm good with maths. I'm good with how things are calculated. There just seems to be, I don't know, perhaps I've got a concept issue with it, but it just seems to me that the money being allocated and what it's being allocated for, whilst I'm sure there's a rhyme and reason, it just has never appeared to me to be a rhyme and reason. I've been doing this for coming up 18 years now, so this is not new. This is for a number of years. How do we actually arrive at doing this scheme or that scheme? If we look at the safer routes to school, 20 miles an hour signs and speed limits being put in place, 20 miles an hour outside most schools at school picking up time is aspirational at best. It's not the maximum they're going to get to. I live directly opposite a school. Quite often, children that leave at the same time as children that are in cars are at the end of the road before that car has moved one car length. That happens. But equally, there are other schools where it does apply. I just think we probably, as elected members, need more detail, Chair. So obviously we'll leave that in your gift. But the thing I was going to get onto was actually the flooding, Peter. We've got a similar problem, as you know, in Dock Road. We had a residents' petition. Tom and I have been working with your team for quite a while now, isn't it? And it's brilliant that they've not looked at let's tap into this, let's dig bigger drains. They're looking at something completely different. So I think that's really commendable of the team. Not to just do the same as everybody else is doing. Let's look at something different. And it may well be something different needs to happen, not just the enforcement, which is that was music to my ears when you said that, because I know previously when I've raised this, when I was leader, it was, well, we haven't really got the capacity to take action on the landowners that should be clearing their ditches. And we know that's been a massive contributor to a lot of the road flooding right across the borough, is landowners not doing what they're supposed to do. So that was really good to hear. I think it's one of those things that, teasing it out here is the right thing, but when it comes to this specific part that we've just been doing with the ITB, I think we just need a bit more detail and work with it, because I think I'm sure, I know Ben knows what he's doing. He's been doing this for a number of years. He's been a councillor longer than I have, but it was just for the rest of everybody, not just here but outside. When and Councillor Maney and I have had it before, where residents said, "Well, I had a serious car accident here 4 years ago and nothing's happened." We don't know if it's been the only one. We don't know if it's one of 20 and why it takes so long. And that might be really important, but there's been 21 down the road or 25 down the road, and 2 fatalities, which is then going to increase it. So I think just quite a bit more detail. And I know Councillor Allen, when he was elected last time, raised with me a number of times about the junction at Marshfoot and the number of accidents there. It's always surprised me there are accidents there, but I think getting into this might be able to establish with us and residents why we allocate the money and how we allocate that money and how much and when. So, but I'd leave that in your gift, Chair, as it's your gift.
Okay. Does anyone want to come in on anything Councillor Gledhill has just Matt?
Thank you, Chair. Just a few points to add on there. You are correct with regards to the figures and why the figures are proposed at the levels that they are. For a number of years we've kind of said, we'll allocate X amount of pounds into this area and we'll work to that budget. And it's quite clear that what we need to do in terms of intervention, it really comes to whatever it costs is what it costs. So we're trying to change the tact on that by saying, for example, on the programme this year is A13 between Five Bells and the Manor Way. We've put a figure in that we know is what we're going to spend on the feasibility study to work out what we need to do there, and then that will go forward to next year for whatever the cost is what that cost will be. So that's why we're going through that process now, rather than trying to do cradle to grave scheme design within 1 year. and trying to do it at breakneck speed and not doing it quite the way that we should do, we're kind of saying, well, we need to do the design work now, find the costs, get that cost, and then implement it in the right year. I know it takes a little bit longer, but it's a bit more thorough and a little bit more, it's better for engagement with residents because we can take that time to engage. I think Councillor Watson may be aware that we're currently out to engagement with London Road, West Thurrock, where we're gauging, to the extent of scheme design that residents wish us to go through, and that's why we're looking at adding in more money this year, because we know that the level of intervention is going to be quite high because of the residents' feeling of what we need to do there. So that's kind of where we're at. I understand your point with regards to 20 mile an hour speed zones. This is from discussion with Councillor Maney, where we've had quite a lot of requests for investigation of 20 mile an hour speed limits, and this is just to try and work on that investigation process again to understand what's the implications of doing what we need to do, doing the modelling, doing all those exercises, finding out what we need to do to provide those facilities in those locations where they are appropriate, and then seeking that funding down the line to actually realise it to the potential that it needs to be. And one final point about Marshfoot Junction. You'll be pleased to know that we are currently working on a redesign of that junction as part of the Safer Roads Fund allocation that was granted to the council, because that road is part of the A126, and we're currently working on that design for hopefully for implementation next year.
I would say they take both on the behalf of the residents of Tilbury and indeed Little Thurrock Rectory, which seem to be the ones that crack up more often. Or certainly we get the complaints from it. Yeah, that's good, but I still it's great. It's good detail, but again, I'm sure our residents now will know. Oh well, this has happened 2 years ago. This is why it's taken 2 years to get to where we are, rather than it just being the council doing nothing, dragging their feet for 2 years. It's obviously a process, but I really feel that we need to understand more. But I'll leave that, as I say, your gift.
Do we have any further? I'll go to Councillor Allen and then Councillor Watson.
Lovely, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matt. It's music to my ears. It really is. I know you touched on, and it was an education actually of the slides you put up there of how much the cost to these RTAs, the road traffic accidents, fatalities, and so on. It really was quite an education. Didn't realise that it cost that much. But again, with respect to the junction, the Marshfoot Junction and Brett's Farm, do we know exactly what's going to be implemented there? Is it going to be a roundabout? Is it going to be a traffic light selection, or just a cut in the 50 mile an hour speed limit?
Thank you, Chair. At the moment, the design is looking at a roundabout, so not even a mini roundabout, an actual proper compact size roundabout that enable HGVs to travel around them properly. We've got a long ways to go. We've got to negotiate with National Highways because there's land ownership that they have, and we need to try and secure that land. But we're just finalising those details now so that we can engage with them and secure all the necessary land and programme it in.
I can only thank you for that, Matt, and I hope that implementation of this doesn't take too long, and it will create less accidents there. I'm sure we'll probably still have the odd one, but the severity of some of them that's been there has been quite terrible, and we only had one last week. I understand that was quite bad, but I thank your team for all the work you do. Thank you,
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matt. Can I just ask you, in Appendix 3, on the table, we've only got 2019 to 20 schemes as a priority. It'd be really good to see it pushed out a little bit more. I really welcome the view of that, obviously, of London Road, and part of that on the Safer Routes school, you've got West Thurrock there, so it'd be really good to encompass that into the London Road consultation as well, because you could kill two birds with one stone with that, really, because it sits on the road. And thanks for sorting out the feasibility study as well that's going to go forward for the 5 belts and down West Thurrock. I really appreciate that. Thanks.
Do we want to comment on any of that, or no? Do we have any further questions or comments from committee? No? No? Okay. Well, as Councillor Maney alluded to earlier and Councillor Gledhill just there, I think it would be a good idea if committee set up a subcommittee to go through this in more detail, look at the way the ITB is allocated and as well as the AIP and if that's working as efficiently and effectively as possible. Have a couple of sessions on this with a view to coming up with recommendations and then send that off to Cabinet. Is committee happy with this? Is committee happy for me to liaise with Democratic Services to set this up?
I'd certainly second that.
Yep. Okay. All right. Brilliant.
Chair, can we just be clearer with the acronyms in the future for our residents, like and just perhaps say it once what ITB means, and so on with the further acronyms, yeah. Just to make our residents know what we're actually talking about, whilst they're scratching their head and thinking, what does that mean? Okay.
Yep, no problem. We'll go to the recommendations, though. There's 3 for this. I'm not going to read them all out. Are we all happy to agree them? Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, that's the last report of the evening. I believe the last item on the agenda is the work programme, and that can be found on page 75. We've got one more meeting of the municipal year to go and quite a few reports. Does anyone have any comments? Councillor Watson? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. At the last meeting, we were talking about the Stamford Hope Interchange project around task and finish work around the bid before March. I've absolutely heard nothing on that or how that's been set up, and we're literally running out of time on that completely. So, have you got an update or what's happening with that? Or
I have not heard anything at this moment. I will take that back. I will seek to get in touch with Kevin Munnelly tomorrow and get an update from him, and then I will pass that on to the rest of committee, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Are there any other council?
Only, obviously, as I mentioned, going through the meeting, the more I think about it is, obviously, with the electric vehicle charging points, perhaps we can have a briefing note. I don't think it needs a specific item as to the logic about where they're going and what type and what connected curb can do that might be more suitable in places, as Councillor Watson said, established housing areas and estates versus other areas. I know the Chair's not particularly fond of electric vehicles, but oddly enough, I get more and more inquiries each month as to I can't have one outside my road, outside my house, because it's too small, as in the distance between the house and the road, and so on. So I think it's something, as we move forward, we really do need to look at, and indeed, is there another solution rather than the local authority paying for it? Is this something that perhaps as we move forward as part of the local plan, that CTIL or whatever we get as an infrastructure levy, that some of that is taken to start to implement this in older areas? But just a brief note really of where we are at the moment on that strategy, please.
Is that right? Yep. Good stuff. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, I shall close this evening's meeting and look forward to seeing everyone for a long one on the 28th of February.